Call the meeting to order. Would the secretary please take the roll?
Directors Gunther?
Here.
Akbari?
Here.
Huang?
Here.
Weed?
Here.
And Sethy?
Here. At this point, I would like to call on the staff member to lead us in the salute. Laura Heides.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, number 3 on our agenda is public comments. Any member of the public may speak on an issue that is not on the agenda. Would anyone like to come forward? Please state your name and your address.
Hello, I am Mia Mora, LEAF president. My address is 39689 Banyan Tree Road in Fremont. That's my personal residence. It's not the LEAF address. So I don't know if you all are familiar with LEAF, Local Ecology and Agriculture in Fremont. We are a nonprofit, a 501c3, and before I forget, I would also like to introduce Elaine Oyang, who is with me. She's also a board member of LEAF. And we have 3 gardens. One is Fremont's only public community garden where people can rent planters. We have another garden where we grow food that we donate to the Tri-City Volunteers Food Bank. And right adjacent to that is a piece of Alameda Water District property where we are expanding that operation into. So that's kind of my reason of coming in today. And I wanted to familiarize you all with the partnership that LEAF, first of all, who LEAF is, and second of all, our partnership with you. And thank you for making this opportunity for us, for which we're very grateful. And we have some kind of exciting news about using this property. We've just recently partnered with Stop Waste on a project that they have, a brand new project for soil fertility. They're looking at carbon sequestration in farmland, and they saw your property as an ideal location to use as a baseline study because the land hasn't been touched for a long time, and we're looking at going in and farming it, and we're looking at doing that in a permaculture way of using techniques like no-till and bringing in goats that would add the fertility of the soil. We do, water conservation techniques, all drip irrigation. We have water catchment system that we've used. So all those kind of techniques will add to the soil fertility, and they want to be able to test the soil and monitor, that over time and see how that, what the impact of that is. And they would use this as a model that they could then roll out across the region to other farms in the Bay Area. So it's kind of exciting, and you guys would be partnering with us. So I'm hoping that you could use that in some kind of a public relations sense. As you're talking about, it's something the city also very much wants to do as part of their green plan of doing, carbon sequestration as well. So I have a packet for all of you about LEAF, and at the back is a parcel map that shows you where, for those of you who may not know where we're located, it's on the corner of Mallory and Mission, right behind the Mission Valley Veterinary Hospital, and the car lot there. And we're occupying just a corner of a much bigger, like 2-acre plot. And we've been working with Mike Casey for an agreement to extend into the remainder of that, enlarge it. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we could consider a little write-up jointly in the Tri-City Voice or our Aqueduct newsletter, something like that. Yeah?
Okay. At this point, no. You'll, if you could send me an email, and I'll give you a card. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to the consent calendar, we'd like to do an employee introduction, so... Oh, any other public comments, please? Seeing none, we'll close the public comments. And,
Okay, yes, we'd like to take this moment of the board's time, if we may, to introduce a brand-new employee at the district. I'll let our HR manager, Jennifer Rogers, make the introduction of Katie Roberts.
This is Katie Roberts. Very excited to have her on board. She's our new workplace health and safety officer. We're replacing Dawn Carlisle. Katie's coming to us from the city of Sacramento, where she was, get this right, environmental health and safety specialist for the Department of Water Utilities. So, got a water background, super strong safety background. She also has her Associate Safety Professional, ASP certification, gives her street cred in the industry. Also has her bachelor's degree from the University of Tennessee in anthropology, and has safety trainer and safety consultant experience. She's been on all sides of the safety world with the safety compliance management. Super excited to have Katie on board. Any questions for her? She's from Florida previously and then migrated fully across the country to be with us to
Welcome.
Welcome.
we
Thank you very
welcome
much.
you to
Welcome
the
to
district.
ACWD.
There are a lot of people moving from Silicon Valley toward Sacramento. I'm surprised you're willing to make the move here, but we wish you good luck. All right. So we'll move on to the consent calendar. Would a board member like to make a motion to amend the consent calendar?
I'll move we add item 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, and 5.4 to the consent.
I'll second. Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang, aye, Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. And would someone like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended?
So move.
I'll second.
Secretary.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang, aye, Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. All right, the next item is 5.5, and we have a director who would like to recuse himself from.
Correct. I will recuse myself from item 5.5. While I do not have a conflict with properties I own, I am involved. I was close to a group that filed a litigation for that may involve the discharge and water discharges at and about the rubber dam number 3. So, thank you.
Okay, with that, I will turn it over to our general manager.
Thank you, President Sethy. Item 5.5 involves the authorization of professional services agreement for construction management services for the Rubber Dam Number 3 Fishway construction and fabric replacement project. And this item will be presented by our Manager of Engineering and Technology Services, Ed Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer, and good evening, directors. The Rubber Dam Number 3 Fishway Construction and Fabric Replacement Project includes the construction of a new fishway, dam foundation modifications, and installation of new rubber dam fabric and associated components. Construction of the project is anticipated to begin in May 2018, with a requirement for all Ink Creek construction to be completed by October 31, 2018. To help ensure compliance with the contract and permit requirements, construction management services are required. There's adequate funding in the approved 2-year project budget for this expenditure, and the scope and need for construction management services were reviewed with the Engineering and Information Technology Committee on February 14, 2018. So staff's recommendation is by motion, authorize the general manager to execute a professional services agreement with Anchor CM in an amount not to exceed $391,540 for construction management services for the Rubber Dam No. 3 Fishway Construction and Fabric Replacement Project, Job 21083. I'll be happy to address any questions.
Questions from board members?
No question.
None for me either.
Okay, also, because we do have a couple of members in the audience that might be interested in this topic, on the Rubber Dam 3 construction project, we are scheduling a groundbreaking ceremony for the fish ladder, which we're very excited for. And Ms. Heides, will you refresh my memory? What date is that?
Sure. We've set it up for, I believe it's Monday, April 23rd at 10 a.m.
Okay, so for our neighbors to the north, if this is something that you would like to attend, please mark your calendar. We're very excited about it.
Any public comments on this item? With that, would somebody like to make a motion on this?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang, aye, and Sethy.
Aye. That was a motion to approve staff recommendation. So we'll move to bringing Director Weed back in before we proceed. There we go.
Sorry for that.
Okay, so item 5.6 is a resolution amending board rules and code of conduct regarding electronic communications.
And Mr. Stevenson will present this item as well.
Thank you. The board's existing board rules and code of conduct set forth procedures the board must follow to comply with applicable laws and regulations, together with guidelines and procedures to guide members of the board in their interactions with the public, staff, and each other. The board rules are updated from time to time to reflect changes in law, regulations, guidelines, or procedures. Staff and General Counsel recommend the board rules be modified to clarify and improve guidance related to electronic communications and the use of district accounts, such as email, and district-issued electronic devices, such as mobile phones and computers. Pardon me. The proposed modifications are focused primarily on addressing a recent court determination that electronic communications that relate to the public's business are subject to the California Public Records Act, regardless of the type of account or device used in the preparation or transmission of the communications. So the board has seen the proposed revisions previously. The revisions are included in the board packet together with the resolution itself. And staff and General Counsel are available to address any questions on this topic. And staff's recommendation is to adopt a resolution amending Section 6, Electronic Communications, of the Board Rules and Code of Conduct.
Director Weed, would you like to kick us off on the discussion?
No, I'm in agreement with the proposed status. We've had a number of meetings on that. Some of us are more comfortable using our personal computer than trying to do it on two separate computers, but there are means by which you can cross-reference to by including your own email address and communications, your district email address, maintain the appropriate levels, the type of communications and utilization of electronic ware is appropriate.
Director Huang?
No comments?
No comments or questions from my end.
I won't comment on this one.
I have no comments other than to thank staff for all the detailed work and our general counsel. It's quite a bit of work, so thank you very much. We all appreciate it. So would somebody like, is there any public comment at this point? Seeing none, would somebody like to make a motion here?
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Huang? Aye. Weed?
Aye.
And Sethy?
Aye. We'll move on to item 5.7, which is consideration of support for the California Drought, Water, Parks, Climate, Coastal Protection, and Outdoor Access for All Act of 2018.
And if we may, we would like to propose that we sort of package item 5.7 and 5.8 together. These are two proposed bond initiatives that the board requested staff to bring back for your consideration as to whether or not you wanted to have a board position on these two initiatives. And what we're planning this evening is for Laura Heides to make a relatively short presentation, briefly summarize what is contained in the two measures. The board's heard this information before, as well as be responsive to the request that staff received about how potentially ACWD and its customers could benefit from the two measures. And then we're here to respond to any specific questions that you have, and basically then it's the board's prerogative as to what you would want to do. Also, General Counsel will make a few comments about should the district choose to take a position on any of these measures, then there are rules that we need to follow moving forward. So with that, Laura?
Great, thank you, Mr. Shaver. So I'll go ahead and cover both items combined in my presentation. First, on October 15th, 2017, Governor Jerry Brown signed legislation to put a $4.1 billion Parks and Water Bond before voters this June. The measure, upon approval, would enact the California Drought, Water, Parks, Climate, Coastal Protection, and Outdoor Access for All Act of 2018, also known as the 2018 Parks and Water Bond, or Proposition 68. The legislation signed by Governor Brown, SB 5, includes $4 billion in new debt plus the repurposing of $100 million in existing unspent bond funds for a total of $4.1 billion to fund various natural resources-related programs such as habitat conservation and parks, and water-related projects. This measure is currently supported by the Association of California Water Agencies, the California Chamber of Commerce, and various environmental and conservancy organizations. The second bond being considered tonight is the State Water Supply Infrastructure, Water Conveyance, Ecosystem and Watershed Protection and Restoration, and Drinking Water Protection Act of 2018, also known as the Water Supply and Water Quality Act of 2018. This is an $8.877 billion Citizens Initiative water bond that is anticipated to be added to the statewide ballot in November 2018. If approved by voters, this initiative would fund a wide variety of water-related programs, such as for habitat improvements, safe drinking water, water conservation, and water reliability-related projects. This initiative is currently supported by the Association of California Water Agencies and various conservation, agricultural, and environmental justice organizations. Staff has reviewed the text of both bonds, identified categories of funding that may align with current planned district projects or other initiatives that pertain to the district, and has estimated the amount of funding in each category that may be available for these projects or initiatives. The actual availability of funds won't be certain until state agencies develop details for the various funding programs if the bonds are approved by the voters. Additionally, competition for any potentially available funds would be open in most cases to eligible projects throughout the entire state, and some funding programs can be very competitive. So there can be no guarantee of available funding or funding for a specific project. Here you can see the estimated amounts that could be available for district projects under Proposition 68. I should note that this list only includes funding categories that would apply, and these estimates do not include funds that are specifically set aside for non-applicable programs or for disadvantaged communities, as we wouldn't qualify for those. So you can see the grand totals there of potentially available funding would be $724 million as compared to the total available bond funds. And this is estimated funding available in areas that may align with ACWD projects. This additional slide shows on the left-hand side the amounts that could be available, or the total amount that could be available for district projects under Proposition 68, and there's a list of projects there that we've identified. And these total in sum about $144 million. A major portion of this estimated cost is the indirect potable reuse project, which is a very large project and estimated to be on the order of $100 million. A list of other initiatives is also included, you can see there. And these are not specifically ACWD-led projects, but do pertain to the district and could potentially benefit from some of the funding categories in Proposition 68, so it's been included for reference here. So that's the first bond, you can see. And the second bond, which is covered under item 5.8, which would be on the November ballot. You can see here the potential funding availability that we've identified under this, the Water Supply and Water Quality Act of 2018. And again, this only includes the categories in the bond that would apply, or would potentially apply, and the estimates don't include funds that are set aside for specific programs or for disadvantaged communities. And here you can see the list of potential ACWD projects that could qualify under this measure. And they total about $183 million, again with the indirect potable reuse being the largest. And again, we've got the other initiatives that we have identified here that are not our own projects, but the district could potentially benefit as these projects could pertain to the district. So that is a quick overview of the categories of funding that we have identified and the potential amounts, and then the list of projects. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Miyake and Mr. Shaver to cover the remaining items, and I'd be happy to answer questions at the right point on the specifics.
So just one quick item to add to Ms. Haida's presentation, just to remind the board. There's a lot of information that we provided very quickly, but item 5.7, just to do shorthand, is the SB 5 bill that was approved by the governor, signed by the governor, that will be on the June ballot. And then item 5.8 in your packet, I'll call it the Jerry Merrill Bond Initiative. Mr. Merrill, Dr. Merrill came and presented that to the board, and that is still in the process of getting signatures to be on the November ballot. So just a little bit of additional information, and then I'll turn it over to General Counsel, who will talk about the rules of engagement a little bit, and then we're here at the board's pleasure to respond to any questions.
Great. So with that, what I wanted to do is just spend a few minutes, just go over the kind of the legal parameters for what the district cannot do first, actually, and then what the district can do with regard to ballot measures. And I did send a memo out to the directors that kind of outline the law, and then also what I hope is a useful, user-friendly guidance document that you can refer to as this goes forward. And this applies basically to any ballot measures, whether it's this one or any other one. So what I'm going to do here is quickly kind of summarize that, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So what the district cannot do first, and then we'll go into what's permissible. So district directors and district employees may not use the district's time, money, or resources to support or oppose a ballot measure. So what this means is no campaigning, no advocacy with district resources. And the rationale for the law on this is that really it's to avoid using public resources to influence the electorate and undermining any fairness in the election process. So that's in general what the district cannot do. Now what is permissible? So the district may use district resources to evaluate a ballot measure and its impact on the district. Can prepare and present informational and educational materials that are objective, impartial, and factual about the ballot measure. That's what Ms. Heides did in part tonight already. And may prepare and adopt a resolution to take a position on a ballot measure. So the resolutions that were prepared and are included in your agenda packet, I've looked at those and they comply with the requirements of the law. So the clear distinction here is with district resources cannot advocate or campaign, but may educate and provide informational materials. Now sometimes the line between those two is not so clear. So those are the easy laws. And today the law still is, there's some Supreme Court cases that have come down that basically say when it's not so clear, what you need to do is look at the totality of the circumstances. And they've used these magic words, look at the style, the tenor, and the timing of the material to determine whether they're advocacy materials or educational and information materials. And hopefully the guidance document provides a little more detail and some of the steps that would be used for that. And so those are all the things in summary for the district resources. Now, if you're not using district resources, so on your own time and with your own money, you can advocate, you can engage in campaign activities, you can contribute your own money to various campaigns. The key thing for the directors is just to be clear that when you're doing those things, you're acting as an individual and you're not acting on behalf of the board. Now, if the board does take a position, you can use this resolution and say this is the board position, provide factual information, educational information about how the ballot measure may or may not impact the district, but remember, stick within the bounds of educational, informational, and not advocacy and campaigning. So that's a quick summary of kind of the law. Oh, and the one other thing is before you, in President Sethy, you're great at this, be sure you allow public comment before you take any action on this resolution, because that's required as well.
Okay. Thank you for the refresher on the law. We've been through this before, but it's always good to have a reminder. Would somebody like to take the lead on discussion here?
Was it oral communications first, or are we?
Any public input?
Okay, that being the case.
Okay.
Well, at the end of the line, I apparently start first. I'll be supporting both motions, but to be honest, without without enthusiasm. I was frustrated twice. One was the Proposition 50 vote, where I went out and represented the district in the water industry in editorial review boards, saying that those projects would be competitively bid for their priority. That was when the statement, the wording, it didn't happen. They did block funding, and it was just easier to administer it that way, and then so the merits of the project were not tied to the distribution of funds. Then we had the water bond. $8 billion gets you $2.7 billion of storage. Having attended in some of the most arcane meetings of the State Water Commission, where they determined that initially that water supply and storage would not be a priority on the measurements, and it was watered down, and then determined that really it didn't apply to water storage, it was for public benefit, which is apparently anything but water storage, left discouraged. Told that there are lessons learned in each of those cases and that they've been attempting to address it the third time around. The third frustration is that these are public bonds, and the state legislature, at the request of Aqua in some cases, said that only public agencies and not investor-owned water districts, who represent 30% of the people who will be paying off these bonds, could not benefit from the proceeds. The projects we've identified, again, are more on the environmental side, and I think some of them we keep kicking back to the end of our CIP timeline, because they're certainly not our priorities. And some of them, they've been supported by the board, I don't support. So you'll have my yes vote, but not my enthusiasm.
I guess I'm in about the same boat for a different reason. I will be supporting as a director of the water district because I can see the benefit of these bonds to ACWD. But on a more personal side, as a taxpayer, I do question the wisdom of taking on additional debt for the state and for funding capital projects when there's no plan for the long-term operation and maintenance of these facilities that these bonds are going to build. But yes, thank you, Laura. Great presentation. I could see the benefit to the district, so I will be supporting it.
I think my sentiments are very similar to what's been echoed already, but I am supportive because of the benefit to our agency, but I do have some reservation on adding additional debt, and more than that, I don't know if there's really a clear plan on the operations and maintenance of the additional infrastructure that'll be added. I think our agency will do just fine, but across the state, I don't have as much confidence. So, but I think for our agency, we can do quite a bit. So, happy to support.
Well, you're not going to get any greater enthusiasm out of me either. I'll support item 5.7. I'm not a big fan of that June water bond. I think it's falsely labeled. It incurs debt. I'm not 100% certain either. Are the monies going to be spent wisely or properly? There are some, I would say, minor opportunities for ACWD in that measure, and our staff has been very successful in getting money. But the wording of that, when I first saw it at Aqua, the first line was disadvantaged community and environmental justice. And when I see that in the first line of a bond, I'm like, well, good luck ACWD, because we're the evil water company. But I'll support it. The second one I will support, and that one there's a direct benefit to us, $200 million for Orville Dam repair. We will directly benefit from that portion of it, even though it won't be for us. We do get something out of that one that we could say to our ratepayers, hey, this is a benefit, this is why you should vote for it. Even though the ratepayer needs to, quote, pay for those repairs up there, if it wasn't for Orville Dam in place, I don't think Orville would exist this year. So I do strongly support item 5.8. 5.7, I'll support it. I'm not 100% sure if it's good for the state, increasing the debt. Actually not even sure where I'm going to come down to it come election day. But I'll support going out with it. But definitely 5.8.
I want to provide a little bit of history here. When we came out of the Great Recession in 2010, when the water bond was first being considered, that was passed in 2014, I was opposed to that water bond, and campaigned against it because of the amount of state debt that we had incurred. We'd borrowed billions of dollars from Wall Street to finance and balance our state budget the last years of the Schwarzenegger administration going into Governor Brown's administration. And we were, as State Treasurer Bill Lockyer pointed out, we were up at about 11-12% debt versus our state GDP at the time, which was really unmanageable. And that was the primary reason why I was against the water bond, not the content of the water bond, just the timing of it. And so as we gradually paid down the state debt, I felt encouraged and I supported the water bond in 2014. Today, our state debt is down to about 6% of state GDP, which is actually a very healthy level for any state in the country. So I'm encouraged by that, and the governor and the state legislature have paid off all of the monies that we borrowed from Wall Street to balance our previous budgets. That's a very good sign. We've put money into our rainy day fund as well. And so while I do have general concerns about adding on debt to the state, I feel these are both very manageable over the long-term period that the bonds will be paid off. Like other members of the board, I have reservations about both of these bonds. And I clearly understand the concerns expressed about not covering maintenance and operation or O&M costs. But the way that I look at this is that these bonds are to help assist with paying for the capital improvements or investment in these type of projects. And if we didn't have the state bonds, we maybe as a district would be paying for the entire capital improvements ourselves, as well as O&M later on down the road. So O&M was going to be there anyway for this district. And if we can get some state assistance through these bond efforts toward the capital improvements and investments, that would be great. Lastly, I will point out to staff and the public that I believe that there are a number of additional projects that ACWD could pursue in my reading of both measures. One would be maybe trail improvements along Alameda Creek all the way out to the bay. Number two would be partial funding of the proposed Niles Canyon Trail from the Niles District over to Sunol. And then I would really look forward to exploring what monies might be available for enhancements to Quarry Lakes Park, which we co-manage with East Bay Regional Parks District. So I will, the bottom line is I will support both resolutions here.
Okay, so the way we've set this up is with two separate agenda items, and I guess we can take them one at a time. So the item for item 5.7, staff's recommendation was to discuss and consider adopting by motion a resolution supporting the California Drought Water Parks Climate, Coastal Protection, and Outdoor Access for All Act of 2018.
Before there's a motion, I'm just recalling something, if I may contribute it here quickly. The front page of the San Jose Mercury News today has a headline article about sea level rise and the fact that we not only have sea level rise, but we have settlement in our shorelines and earth around the San Francisco Bay Area. And it's like a double whammy for the future. And it's as expressed by Paul Rogers, the journalist who wrote the article. This is not something that will be taken up in the year 2200. We've got to start taking care of these issues now along our shorelines, and of course, it was mentioned that Hayward and Union City are quite vulnerable at the shoreline level, and if you read through both bills, there looks like there's opportunity for funding for sea level rise protection and other things too.
Yes, Union City, with the Union Sanitary District plant being located in the area, an area of significant, one of the areas identified as more rapid subsidence, should be a concern, a major cost to them, as San Francisco is finding out that the retrofit of their sanitary system will be twice the cost of the Hetch Hetchy retrofit in the $12 billion range, and San Francisco has to pick the full tab up there, where on the water side they only paid for 30%. And then the building of levees to protect, because each of the cities was overly confident that there would not be sea level impact on the new construction going along the near the bay. And I remember they once proposed Newark to be Newark by the bay, and it may be more accurate to say Newark in the bay. So, thank you.
Is there any other public comment here? Okay, would a director like to make a motion on 5.7?
I'll move staff recommendation on 5.7.
And I'll second.
Directors Gunther? Akbari?
Aye.
Huang? Aye. Weed?
Aye.
And Sethy?
Aye. So we'll turn to 5.8.
And the recommendation there is to discuss and consider adopting by motion a resolution supporting the State Water Supply Infrastructure, Water Conveyance, Ecosystem, and Watershed Protection and Restoration and Drinking Water Protection Act of 2018.
Any further public input? Okay, board discussion?
Do we have any of the staff input on this one, or is that just a flat?
We've provided input on both bonds, so unless there's any specific questions, we don't have any additional input.
Then.
Fine, I'll make the motion.
I'll second this one. I'll support this one strongly.
Directors Gunther?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
Weed?
Aye.
And Sethy?
Aye. Okay, we're moving quickly through our agenda. We're down to item 5.9.
Yes, and 5.9 involves a resolution approving the Alameda County Water District 5-year strategic plan. And I will again ask Ms. Heides to provide a brief introduction for this. But before doing that, the board has worked very hard in 2017 on adopting, potentially creating, and now this evening we're considering adopting, as far as I know, our first formal strategic plan for the district that encompasses all aspects of what the agency will be doing over the next several years. And speaking on behalf of staff, we appreciate the leadership and direction that the board is providing by going through this effort. I know there was mixed feelings amongst the directors about taking this on. It was a big project for the board, a number of workshops, and speaking on behalf of staff, we're very excited to have this roadmap for the future so that we can operate as efficiently and as productively on behalf of the board and hopefully make some magic happen over the next 5 years. So with that, I'll just provide this over to Laura. We're not going to spend a lot of time going over this because you're very familiar with it already.
Great, thank you, Mr. Shaver. So you recall we had 3 public strategic planning workshops held during 2017 with the Alameda County Water District's Board of Directors, and senior staff to reaffirm the district's core mission and establish strategic goals to drive organizational alignment and priorities for the next 5 years. 5 strategic goals and associated objectives resulted from this process, and the Alameda County Water District 5-year strategic plan was developed to document and communicate these goals, which are shown on the screen, and to track their progress into the future. Staff has presented a draft of this plan at the February 2018 board meeting, incorporated feedback received from the board, and prepared a final version of the plan for approval by the board. So at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions, and the staff recommendation is by motion to adopt a resolution approving the Alameda County Water District 5-year strategic plan. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Well, I'm pleased to see that contingency planning was an item in our strategic plan, and would hope that it hits the prime list here someday. Thank you.
Just want to say thank you and great job. You staff managed to consolidate very diverse opinion into 5 realistic goals with realistic timelines. So thank you.
Yeah, my thanks to staff on working on this and bringing together all the ideas that were presented over the course of the workshops. And I'm really excited about some of the goals that we've laid out for ourselves, especially when it comes to financial transparency, because I know that's something that the public has asked us to really make a bigger focus on, and so I think we're moving in a great direction.
I'd like to thank the staff as well. There's a lot of work. I consider this a living document. This is not a cast in stone where this is where we're going to go. But it's, a very good guideline, and maybe not cast in stone, but certainly on paper. So it's good. We have it, but it's living. So thank you very much for all your hard work.
Likewise, I would like to thank the staff and the board members. This was a real team effort to go through all the meetings and collectively bring together all the inputs. And thank the public as well, because we had a number of folks make contributions there as well. Like Director Gunther, I look at this as a living document, and I hope we all keep it in our hip pocket as we move from one set of meetings to another, because this really helps to establish what our priorities are in the district, and as we get down to the specifics that will spin off from this effort, then we'll have a much clearer road path. And I also believe that it helps all of us to stay focused and not go off on tangents, because here we have a literal agreement that despite all of our differences, this is our agreement for where we wish to go over the next 5 years. And so it's very important not to go way off in proposing ideas or going off on tangents. I also want to thank the staff for incorporating many of the recommendations and last-minute amendments, inputs that I submitted. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciated that. I went back through the final draft and I could see here, there, oh yeah, great, thanks. All right, so thank you very much. With that, any further public inputs? So we're going to make the momentous step of adopting a 5-year strategic plan, if there's a motion.
I'll make the motion to move to staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther?
Aye.
Akbari?
Aye.
Huang?
Aye.
Weed?
Aye.
And Sethy?
Aye. Yay.
Well, let me tell you what you really voted on.
Oh, ouch.
Item 3.
All right, so we'll move on to Section 6, which is reports. Would anybody like to make comments, either from the public or the board, on board committee reports? None? Okay, 6.2 on operational reports. I have two that I'd like to pull for comment. Is there any other director that would like to go first on an item? Okay, so I had asked in advance for an update on our rainfall report, since we had a couple storms that came through. Not much.
Okay, up on the screen is our updated rainfall report that shows the recent rainfall we got last weekend. As you know, we had a pretty dry February, and last weekend we had 1.5 inches of rain, so we see a little bump in our trend there. Overall, you can see we're still way below the average for this time of year, but last weekend, due to the ability to capture most of that water coming down Alameda Creek, we gained about 1,500 acre-feet of water just from that one storm. So that's good news. Looking to the future, we do have some weak low-pressure systems coming through the area in the next few days, so we're expecting a little bit of rain, not much. In the 2-week outlook, we're looking for a 70% chance of above normal precipitation, so that's some good news. However, for the latest 30-day precipitation outlook, it's about 50% chance of above normal rainfall, 50% chance of below, so that's anybody's guess at that point. Doesn't look like we'll get the miracle March, but at least we're getting some help.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just a quick comment. We got caught flat-footed on the last drought. And our drought really lasted for about 4 months, which is the time that they were at zero allocation. So that does not appear to be in the works this year. But what caught us flat-footed was we had drained or lowered the larger of the groundwater reservoirs in order to do work in Alameda Creek. And this time we're drawing down the upper portion of the upper above the fault. Much smaller groundwater reservoir than the one below the fault, but one that keep a close eye on the rainfall report as we do the work in the creek. We got burned last time. We don't want to get burned again, and if you have to delay a project for an appropriate decade or two, that's fine with me.
Other comments? Excuse me. No more comments on 6.2.1. So I also asked if we could have an explanation under the water production report. I had noticed in the report that was in our board package that TP2 was apparently offline for the month of March. And so I was inquiring with staff as to what routine maintenance things might be going on and what upgrades to the plant are occurring.
I'd be happy to respond to that. So I have a little list that I'll share with you to keep it brief. So in response to your question, Director Sethy, annually water treatment plant number 2 is shut down and its basins are drained to perform yearly inspections and maintenance work that cannot be done efficiently when the plant is online. After draining the plant, the various basin and basin equipment are cleaned and inspected. Since all basin filter plenums, these are the under drains below the filters, and water channels are confined spaces, an attendant must be present when a confined space is entered. Throughout the treatment plant process block, isolation valves, rate control valves, entry hatches, and filter under drains are inspected and needed repairs are made. In the sedimentation basins, the sediment removal system, we call it the track vac system, is rebuilt. It typically, if it's not rebuilt, it will fail in the subsequent summer And when that happens, we have to take the plant offline, dewater a basin, and it significantly reduces our production capabilities during the peak demand months. So that's why we rebuild our sedimentation equipment during the winter shutdown. In the ozone contactor basins, the ozone diffusers and stainless steel piping are inspected. The water treatment chemical systems are inspected, and chemical injection quills are cleaned or replaced. For the solids handling system, the equalization and solids thickener pipelines are cleaned using an outside contractor to auger clean the pipelines, and the filter press plates are pressure washed, and the filter cloths are replaced. In the power generation facility, all raw water components, including turbine draft tubes, plant flow control, and emergency bypass valves, are inspected. So everything I just mentioned, we do routinely every year when the plant is taken offline. But specifically for this particular shutdown, we have some special projects that we're undertaking, and those are replacement of 2 large isolation valves between the 2 process trains, replacement of the catalytic media in one of the ozone destruct units, repairing the solids filter press, and that work involves replacement of the roller end support feet, repair of the frame that's cracked, and realignment and leveling of the filter press. We're performing 3-year preventative maintenance and testing of circuit breakers and protected devices on the plant power generation equipment and the 12 kV electrical service. And we're upgrading the 12 kV electrical system components that are needed for PG&E compliance to qualify for the, quote, renewable energy self-generation bill credit transfer, known as the RSBCT program. This program will allow any excess power generated at Water Treatment Plant 2 to be credited to another district facility, such as the Whitfield Zone 1 booster station, to reduce the district's overall PG&E electric bill. And the final example is we're supporting project engineering with the Water Treatment Plant 2 PLC replacement project. So we're doing more, but I just wanted to give you a brief highlight.
That's a pretty comprehensive list of work going on. I presume that the board has approved all these different things. And
certainly. When the expense budget is approved, a lot of the, all of the expense items are included. If there are capital items that we haven't anticipated, they would be included in our capital budgets that are approved by the board.
If I can focus on the solid filter press. Now that's almost, what, over $800,000 to do that work, if I read the last agenda correctly?
A new filter press is on the order of $800,000 to $1 million.
But this repair work will be significantly less than that?
Oh, much, yes. Okay. And we're doing it under expense accounts.
I understand the need for maintenance and ongoing, but I had the opportunity to visit the South Feather River treatment facility with a centrifugal design machine that would appear to be far superior in its performance and operational efficiency than our current filter press. And I strongly encourage the staff to contact South Feather River and get information on the centrifuge that they have installed to accomplish the same function.
Definitely. We just, on a side note, we typically invite vendors in. We do pilot programs. We have invited, it might have been 7 or 8 years ago, a manufacturer of a centrifugal dewatering system as a pilot to demonstrate its performance compared to our existing filter press. at that time, it did not perform as well, but technology changes, and so we're constantly looking at new technology, new devices to get to be more efficient in getting the work done.
Yes, I noted that Union Sanitary District had very disappointing results with the centrifuge. But I'm told, but based on the comments made at south of the river, they said those have been overcome, and they're particularly pleased with that design and function.
Okay.
Yeah, I was with Director Weed when we visited South Feather, and the person in the same position that you were in, Mr. Peterson, commented that 10-15 years ago, when he was evaluating centrifugal dewatering systems, it was not his first or second choice, but that there's been a lot of advancement in the technology, and so he said to us it amounted to a much cleaner process, reduction in cost, and a smaller footprint for what they were doing, much smaller footprint. And so I liked what I saw. And then Director Weed and I, when we were down in Santa Barbara, we saw the Goleta sanitary plant as well, and they had a centrifugal system there as well.
Okay.
So I hope we will evaluate it.
Definitely.
I have another side question here. In the Water Resources Committee report, and I'm not on that committee, there was mention that we were moving 8,400 acre feet down the San Luis Reservoir, and I'm wondering, right now our state water project allocation is at 20%. If our Table A allocation goes up, where do we plan on putting that water?
Well, that would be, first of all, very good news if our allocation does go up. As a reminder, our allocation's at 20% right now. In more recent discussions, we were at the end of February, Department of Water Resources was preparing us for a possible reduction in the Table A allocation. With this latest storm in March, we're all hopeful that at least it's stabilized at the 20%. As of today, there has not been any discussions to increase the allocation. However, if there is an increase, we can carry over about, I think it's about 10,000 acre feet in San Luis. So we do have some room to play with to prepare us for any future dry year situations too.
And finally, I noticed if I interpreted properly, we're pulling water back from semi-tropic?
The current plan is with the current condition and the 20% Table A. We are preparing as if we're going to be pulling back from semi-tropic. It all depends on how March goes, how much additional local water we can capture, and of course the final Table A allocation.
I could add to that briefly. The water industry and the ability to do water transfers is struggling to make changes, but it may come about with some of the current legislation. We had the Monterey agreements many years ago that were done in without public exposure, which is probably the only way they could have been accomplished, but a lot of criticism. As with many of these issues, once you go through the trauma, it takes a while to come back and revisit the issue of water transfers. But as that is done, we are in an excellent position to capitalize on our water resources. As was noted, we have 15 years of drought supply and semi-tropic, and we have water well situated at San Luis that could support ag interest with the need to maintain orchards. It's a hardened demand that could result in many millions of dollars in additional income to this district if properly marketed. And we have the authority to market it, which is really the big challenge. Thank you.
I would just like to close on one additional issue here under water production, because it seems like wherever I go around the community, I don't know about other board members, but everybody's asking me it looks like we're going into another drought. You know, where are we as a district? And I'm trying to reassure people that we are actually in a very healthy position in terms of our groundwater basin, our surface storage in other places, and even if we are in a drought for this calendar year, it looks like we can manage ourselves pretty well as a district.
Actually, I'm going to offer one more comment to build off of something that Mr. Peterson just mentioned. The ACWD will be will be participating in the PG&E program to get credits to offset our power bill from other facilities, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that amounts to about $10,000 a month.
That's correct. That's what we're anticipating as a minimum.
Okay, yeah, so I want to thank staff for making that possible, and I think that's something that the public should definitely be aware of. And if we have other opportunities to expand on our participation in that program, or other opportunities to offset our energy costs, I would definitely encourage staff to look into that.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to one comment. I was looking at the hardness graph, and I gotta thank you again. We're using much smaller hammers right now over in Union City when it comes to breaking the water off. So you guys are doing a good job. Thank you so much. That's greatly appreciated, actually.
I'll take the appreciation this month. I'll see if I can't get somebody to sit in my chair in April.
Oh, it's okay. We're used to it.
Just because you brought it up. Towards the end of the month, we're going to get a different quality of water from San Francisco, and of course we blend that with our harder groundwater. Currently, San Francisco is providing us with Hetch Hetchy water. The hardness is about 10, but they're going to go off Hetch Hetchy in a couple of weeks, while Water Treatment Plant 2 is still offline. We knew this in advance, but they extended their shutdown. So blending with water from their Sonol water treatment plant, the hardness is more like 130. So it's going to be a lot more challenging. So what we plan to do is ramp up our desalination facility to the extent that we can in order to try and meet our hardness goals.
And you'll be on vacation for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks for those staff reports. Any other board comments on operational reports? Anything from the public? Okay, we'll turn to 6.3, which is staff presentations.
Yes, and we have one presentation planned for the board this evening. This is the annual presentation that Mike Hollowell makes each year. As you know, Mike tries to make the presentation interesting and provide new information. This year, my understanding is we're going a little back to the basics to provide a more of an overview, especially for Director Akbari, who's relatively new to this. So for you seasoned directors, maybe some of this will be a review, but we're also covering the standard material that we cover each year. So I will turn this over to Mr. In for some introductory remarks before we get to Mike's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. The Replenishment Assessment Act of the Alameda County Water District requires an engineering survey and report on groundwater conditions, which was ordered by the board on November 9th. And it's the first step in the process to establish a replenishment assessment for next fiscal year. Recommendations in the survey report are based on projected activities needed to sustain the groundwater basin in fiscal year 2018 and 19, with consideration of groundwater levels and quality documented in the 2017 Groundwater Monitoring Report. Tonight, Mike Hollowell, Groundwater Resources Engineer, is presenting information on the Niles Cone Groundwater Conditions and Survey Report to assist the board in its review of two reports received by the board at last month's board meeting. Eileen Chen, Groundwater Resources Scientist and author of the Groundwater Monitoring Report, and Michelle Myers, Groundwater Resources Manager, are also in the audience tonight. This is Mike's 26th year of authoring the survey report, and we can't quite figure out how many years he's done this presentation, but I'm sure it's up close to that number. This is also Eileen's 14th year authoring the groundwater monitoring report. We also have two other guests in the audience tonight. Jan Lee, if you want to wave, is a water resources manager from the city of Hayward, and Alice Towie is a senior civil engineer from the East Bay Municipal Utility District. The city of Hayward and East Bay MUD are both groundwater sustainability agencies, and are working together to develop a groundwater sustainability plan for the East Bay Plain subbasin, which is north and adjacent to the Niles Cone groundwater basin. The timing of tonight's groundwater presentation is very appropriate, as next week, March 11th to the 17th, is National Groundwater Awareness Week, which is an annual observance to highlight the responsible management and use of groundwater. Established in 1999, the National Groundwater Awareness Week provides an opportunity for people to learn about the importance of groundwater and how the resource impacts our everyday lives. Similar to previous years, our groundwater resources staff has coordinated with local high schools, and they'll be providing groundwater presentations in advanced placement environmental science classes at 3 local high schools early next week. So with that introduction, and to help us get ready for National Groundwater Awareness Week, I'll turn it over to Mike Hallowell, who will be providing information on local groundwater conditions in the Niles Cone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wren. Good evening, directors. To kick things off, we thought it would be good to start by trying to convey a sense of flow and purpose to all the detail in the 2 reports that the board got last month. Our work, or the individual pieces of information relate to one of 4 categories or critical steps that we need to take each year to comply with the Replenishment Assessment Act. Looking at groundwater conditions the last fiscal year into the current fiscal year involves doing our best to assess inflows and outflows to and from the groundwater basin, and then to assess the consequences of that in terms of changes in groundwater levels and changes in salinity in the groundwater basin. That feedback is provided by the groundwater monitoring report. Critical points from that report and some of the maps end up in the survey report. With groundwater basin conditions updated to the present, we're in a good position then to project groundwater conditions into the next fiscal year, including identifying or estimating any supplemental water needed for groundwater recharge, and of course that's prerequisite to updating groundwater basin costs. And as we go through and update available revenues to meet those costs, a rate of replenishment assessment is recommended, and it goes in the survey report for the board's consideration. So going up to the top on groundwater basin conditions, it's very difficult to talk about that without some type of cutaway view of the aquifer system. This is not a really robust geologic cross-section, but it'll do. To the right side of the screen, you get a sense of the sloping rock of the hillside underground, and then we have on the bottom the valley floor. And then over to the left, we're underneath San Francisco Bay, which is shown as a like a dark green, like puddle over to the upper left. The light green signifies the extent of brackish water in the basin at about 1962, and the blue indicates groundwater that was not impacted by saltwater intrusion at that time. Between about 1900 and 1962, the aquifer system below the Hayward Fault, which is to the left of this red dotted vertical line, was in a state of overdraft. So brackish water I should say marine water from San Francisco Bay, got into the Niles Cone, and then got inland via the Newark Aquifer, reaching the Hayward Fault. Okay, along the way, significant amounts made its way down to the Senable Fremont and also to the Deep Aquifer. And we can get a sense of the onset of seawater intrusion through the Newark Aquifer between 1900 and 1962, looking in kind of a planned bird's eye view. And it came in like this. And then in 1962, this was the geographic extent of brackish water in the Newark Aquifer. The 1960s was an important turning point for the district for groundwater management. By that time, the mechanics of seawater intrusion in the Niles Cone were better understood, and the district got the Replenishment Assessment Act. The recharge operation, the artificial recharge operation at the Quarry Lakes was significantly expanded, and we got State Water Project water to supplement local water as a source of groundwater replenishment, and critical policies and programs would be added along the way. Now, all of this, of course, incurs cost, not just at the time these measures are instituted for the first time, but they're in a state of operation and implementation all the time, so there's cost every year. Accordingly, the authors of the Replenishment Assessment Act saw fit to include a provision to require the metering of wells so that the district could recover cost, raise revenue by charging individual owners and operators of wells according to the amount of groundwater that they pump. That's the replenishment assessment, and the unit rate of charge, of course, is the replenishment assessment rate. All of this is consistent with the aims of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, with which we are, of course, we are complying. Contemporaneous with the implementation of these measures in the 60s and 70s, there was a rapid recovery of groundwater levels in the Niles Cone. This is a hydrograph of the Newark Aquifer forebay indicator well. And levels have been maintained above sea level by a comfortable margin since that time. With infusions of high-quality water into the Quarry Lakes and then raising levels in the Newark Aquifer back above sea level, that enabled the flow direction in the Newark Aquifer to reverse back to the natural direction towards San Francisco Bay, and enabling, of course, the process of displacing brackish water back out to San Francisco Bay. The recovery as of the fall monitoring event in 2017 stands at about 24% by area. And now we go down to the next aquifer, the Senable Fremont Aquifer, which is beneath the Newark Aquifer. Salt has been exported out of this aquifer as well by pumping of wells that now feed, of course, the desalination facility. But attenuation has been seen not so much by a shrinkage of the area of impact. And when I mean the area of impact, I mean the area in which the concentrations are greater than the drinking water standard of 250 parts per million. So the attenuation has been seen not so much by a shrinkage of that area, but by a reduction in concentrations. So we've been using mass as our metric to gauge how things are going along as we march through time. And when we do that, we find that we estimate that the mass is reduced by 558,000 metric tons to 375,000 metric tons. And this is the mass of the chlorides in the impacted area, not the entire geographic area of the Niles Cone. If the current area of impact were to all become a uniform 250 ppm over the whole area, that mass is estimated to be 172,000 metric tons. So the 375 is estimated to be about 47% from the 558 to the 172. Now there is an asterisk on these numbers. Why is that? Well, when we do this calculation, we're taking the chloride contours and then we're integrating that over the model depth of the aquifer with a porosity, but there is clay down there. There's some clay beds. It's not all sand and gravel. It's not all homogeneous. There is some heterogeneity, and that affects the accuracy of the calculation. So there's a little bit of a hypotheticalness to this calculation, but if we use the same approach every year, we do get a sense of how things are changing over time. But to get to ground truth this a bit, we can get a sense as to the pumping removal component of the attenuation by taking a look at the load going through the desalination facility. And when we do that, we can see that it's about, the chloride removal is about 4,000 to 5,000 metric tons per year. There has been some interest in how things are changing at the desal facility itself. How is the concentration? Is that changing at all? Well, over a 5 years of data, there is a trend line showing a decrease of about 27 milligrams per liter of total dissolved solids. Of that, chloride is about a reduction of about 9 milligrams per liter, according to our estimates. The implication of this is that perhaps there's some energy savings with the reverse osmosis process. And there is some compared to what it would be absent any reduction. While we're on this topic, though, I'd like to emphasize that the desal facility, the cost of the desal facility is not a common groundwater basin expense. It's covered exclusively by the ACWD distribution system customers. The ACWD distribution system is not pumping as much from the deep aquifer compared to the Centerville Fremont aquifer, but it is very important. We're paying attention to it. There are a number of wells other than ACWD that are tapped into it. And we are monitoring levels and water quality just like we are with the other aquifers. This is the fall 2017 distribution of chlorides. And also a number of wells abandoned wells that have been destroyed that were or could have been or could become a source of transmission of poor quality water into the deep aquifer, and those have been destroyed under the oversight of our well ordinance program. And of course, we're also helping to maintain the pressure of the deep aquifer through recharge in the quarry lakes, maintaining levels in the Newark aquifer. This is the map showing the water levels in the Newark aquifer. That interaction occurs at the forebay area near the recharge ponds, through the Centerville Fremont and through the deep aquifer. That's where the aquifers tend to have some vertical communication. So it might be good then to take a look at go back to the forebay indicator well, this time looking at the history that's more recent. We can see that we've got through the drought in the Shin Gravity Rediversion 2 project, and then levels bounce back up to near the top of the operating range. And through next fiscal year, we're projecting that those levels will be sustained in the upper part of the range. And now stepping over the Hayward Fault, we get a sense as to the flow direction and then the hydrograph for that indicator well. And you can see that there is a dip, and that's expected, in fact planned, to accommodate the Rubber Dam 3 fish ladder construction, and then the levels would pop back up. But with that project, you can see that the levels are still pretty well within, are expected to be well within our operating range. These projected levels, excuse me, presume realization of our water supply demand inventory through next fiscal year. Back in December when we worked on this, we had projected a less than normal winter of rainfall, and hence the need to take about 2,000 acre-feet of state water project water to supplement local water for groundwater recharge. This factors into an update of the state water project component of the groundwater basin costs. Other than that, the rest of the cost items to take care of the groundwater basin were already in the budget. But we did, most of our work was to go through the budget in detail and to pick out only those items that benefit the groundwater basin or the fractions of those items that benefit the groundwater basin for the benefit of all users of the basin commonly. And we look at revenue the same way. We ask ourselves, if we were a replenishment-only district, what of the district's revenue stream we could avail ourselves to for the groundwater basin? And, well, we start with replenishment assessment revenue. Number one, agricultural and municipal recreation. The rate for that is $8 an acre foot. It can't be changed. That's in the Replenishment Assessment Act. But the amount of pumping from that constituency has been steady, in fact, maybe declining a little bit at 700 acre feet. The rest of the private pumping is subject to the variable rate, which is currently $402 an acre foot. Should the board concur with the rate increase to $437, that would raise the revenue from that constituency to $481,000. Now, when I say private, I don't just mean private sector. There are some agencies with some wells in this group as well. And then we come to the ACWD distribution system. And I hate to use the same words year over year, but I can't think of a better way to articulate it. It's almost a song now, and it goes like this. Our distribution system customers, the ACWD distribution system customers, don't get replenishment bills in the mail, but part of the payment of their water bill does go to pay for groundwater costs, which is appropriate because a lot of groundwater is pumped into the distribution system. So to be fair to the private pumpers, we evaluate that water using the same replenishment assessment rate. So should the board concur with the rate increase, that would recognize the contribution from the distribution system to be about $8.1 million. Then we come to the rest of the revenue, the 1% tax, we have the state water override tax, and then grants. This is a pretty good sum of money coming in next year. It's mostly for the Rubber Dam 3 project. But we still end up a little bit short of the total of $25 million by about $3.5 million. $3.5 million. Now, as a whole agency, the district, of course, will have the money to pay all its bills, but we do like to see groundwater costs covered by the groundwater side of the district's revenue stream. We are confident that's happening, and we see a path for that to continue to happen when we take a multi-year cash flow analysis and look at this. So here we are in FY 2018-19 with a $3.5 million shortfall. We are projecting annual shortfalls right up until year 2023. Now, at that time, not only do the lines meet, but something else happens, and that is the cumulative revenue and cumulative costs going back to our starting point, considering actual revenues and actual costs. The cumulative revenue and cumulative costs match at that point. It's a wash. And that happens just as the recharge facility projects wind down. So, in other words, although the 8.7% increase is not a small increase, we see a way where it need not be higher than that with consideration of the revenue already accrued. And it's also a useful perspective to recognize that for 10 years the district did not raise replenishment rates. So had it done so uniformly since 1997, it would be a 3.4% year-over-year increase to get to the 437. Taking a look at we'd like to look at the Santa Clara Valley Water District and the Orange County Water District, because those two agencies are both managing groundwater basins they're heavily utilized groundwater basins in urban settings. They have replenishment acts similar to ACWD's, and you can get a sense as to where their rates are, where they are now, and what their projected, what their staff is recommending. So that concludes the material we have tonight. I'd just like to remind the board that the public hearing on replenishment assessment is next month, April 10th, Tuesday. So with that, takes any questions or comments?
Director Weed, do you want to lead off?
I'll dominate the conversation on this one. It's my graduate work, and actually my undergraduate thesis was on groundwater in the Santa Clara Valley. This is an extraordinary resource for the district, the water resources. It's we have a multi-year supply, a reserve supply, and it's a reservoir. What's interesting about 96%, as I understand, of the metered water is ACWD. So we have control and the primary operator of the reservoir.
We are the primary.
By far, overwhelming. Yeah, it's our reservoir. I think it's an underutilized asset in the sense that if you were to use raw well water for irrigation purposes, it would, I think, be a very opportune methodology of being able to provide water to meet needs at a small fraction of the cost of using treated water. And I understand in our CIP we have a proposal to look at some pilot projects that would do that. It was suggested at the time we'd go from $2,000 an acre foot to about $50 an acre foot to achieve that water and meet the needs of some of our larger irrigation users. The other is that we're getting better definition of what our aquifer is. We've had some deep wells that have found the bottom of the aquifer. We don't have a defined aquifer because Alameda Creek over the eons has cut through any opportunity to have the bay come in and build an aquiclude. So, and I'd also note that when we talk about chlorides, that is not a toxic substance. Salt is good, and if we go over, the reason it's 250 milligrams per liter is that's the taste level for the most sensitive taste for a person drinking water. Putting in higher salt content is not a public health issue. And if you get over 500 parts per million, then you might, some of the more sensitive agricultural products may be impacted. So we have some flexibility. We have a huge safety margin, and I would encourage us, if we had capital funds to invest, the far better return is maximizing the effectiveness and efficiency of the groundwater reservoir. Thank you.
No questions.
Being relatively new to the board, a lot of this is, it really is kind of like drinking from a fire hose, and so it's a lot of information for me to take in, so I appreciate you providing me with a lot of reading material over the past year, and for making yourself available to me. I don't have any questions right now, but I will be coming to you with some questions as I kind of review the material a little bit more.
Director Akbari, you're in good luck because we provide the fire hydrants too.
I just added irrigation and fire flows would be far more effectively provided with a separate system.
Well, I don't know how many times I've seen this report now, and every time I love it. I really do enjoy seeing this report. I don't know if it's because I grew up on well water way back in Connecticut or what, but it's just thank you for all your efforts, and I continue to look forward to more. I really like what we do on this. I think we've got an incredibly well-documented groundwater basin, and it's because of you guys. You know, it's not because it's right there. I mean, sitting right in front of us. You guys did that. It just didn't happen. So thank you.
Mike, thank you very much for the report. It's always comprehensive. I was humming along as you were singing your tune. And I appreciate where Director Akbari is right now, because I remember years back, before I was on the board, coming in with Mr. Shaver and former General Manager Mr. Perino, asking all these questions, trying to make sense of everything that was in these two reports that you provided last month. It's a lot of information. And I think the good news for the community is that since the 1960s, over the decades, we have been moving that salinity concentration back toward the bay, and means for a healthier groundwater system for the future.
Definitely.
I'll quickly add, we don't have algae issues with groundwater.
Okay. So, is there action required here? Not till next month, right?
Correct.
Any questions from our guests?
No compliments, praise, or?
Question? Well, I hope the city of Hayward and East Bay Mud are able to learn and leverage off of our own reports here, too. Yeah.
Okay.
So with that, we'll move to general manager's reports.
Yeah, I believe we have 2 reports this evening only, correct, staff? Just the ones on the agenda. And I hope the board will indulge me for a moment as I want to provide some information on the request that we received from the Association of California Water Agencies and provide context for that request. So, as the board's aware, SB 623, which is a bill being proposed by Monning, he's from Carmel, is a proposal to apply a public goods charge or a tax to California's drinking water. This statewide water tax is proposed as a way to address a lack of access to safe drinking water for some people who live in rural, disadvantaged communities. And Senator Monning is calling the proposed public goods charge the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fee. First off, I want to say that the issues that Senator Monning is trying to address are very real. There are very real water quality issues, and I'll talk about that for a moment here. So one proponent of this bill has estimated that each year over 1 million Californians are exposed to unsafe drinking water, and 296 small public water systems, primarily in the San Joaquin Valley, have been unable to supply safe drinking water for years and maybe even decades in some areas. And although there are disagreements about the accuracy of these numbers, they're still significant. They're still, frankly, too high. And the State Water Code, Section 106.3, statutorily recognizes that every human being has a right to safe, clean, affordable, and accessible water adequate for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. So this human right to water extends to all Californians, including disadvantaged individuals and groups and communities in rural and urban areas. So ACWD has worked with California water agencies to try to develop effective solutions and advance appropriate funding strategies to address this important public health and social issue. In addition, ACWD's Sacramento representative, Ron Davis, has also been working with Aqua on this issue. However, many urban water agencies in the state are concerned that a public goods charge that would impact urban water agencies would increase the cost of water service for all users, including economically disadvantaged customers in the urban areas of the state, which outnumber the people in the rural areas that this bill is trying to help. CUA, California Urban Water Agencies, of which ACWD is a member, estimates that about 20% of urban areas in California are comprised of low-income households. In other words, 20% of the urban water customer population in the state is low income. Locally, from our own recently implemented Help on Tap program, we know that about 735 ACWD customers are at or below 200% of the federal poverty level, and it's likely that many more face significant household financial challenges with the increasing cost of water and the high cost of living in the Bay Area. So COO and Aqua agencies, of which ACWD is a member of both, believe that the state should do the following. Number one, first specify which problems will be addressed and how the revenues will be used before a water fee or surcharge is implemented, before turning hundreds of local water agencies into taxation entities that send money to Sacramento. And two, consider other financing alternatives more directly linked to income. For example, dollars from the state general fund, funds from the Safe Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, or the SRF, general obligation bonds, and an assessment proposed by agricultural organizations related to nitrates, to provide a dedicated fund for affordability and not a public goods charge, which makes affordability in the urban areas of the state a bigger problem than it already is. So Aqua is opposing this bill and calling it one of the most important efforts undertaken by the association in recent years. Considering the potential negative consequences, Aqua is launching a fundraising effort to secure an outside public affairs firm to help develop a more strategic external affairs campaign and to assist with a coalition building of outside the water industry. They also intend to fund an advertising campaign focused on key legislative districts. They hope to secure enough funding to potentially sustain a campaign through the summer. And actually there's two fronts, because received an email from Ron Davis just recently that there's another proposal to put in a budget trailer bill, something very similar to this. So there's another front on this. Is a high bar, 2/3 requirement for this bill to pass in the legislature. Presumably that would also be a requirement for a budget trailer bill, but that's not even known yet. So Aqua has requested $25,000 from ACWD based on the size of our agency. Last I checked with Aqua, as of Tuesday, so far they have collected $110,000. They're trying to get up to about $350,000, but they have enough that they've already hired a firm, so they're going with this. Other agencies in the area, I checked with other Bay Area agencies especially. Contra Costa Water District is likely to contribute, and that would be at about the $10,000 level. But East Bay Mud and San Francisco Public Utilities Commission have indicated that they are not planning to contribute at this time. And this is because the proponents of this bill are doing, frankly, a good job using their environmental justice connections to garner support in some of the urban areas of the state. So the purpose of putting this on the general manager's report on the agenda tonight is to inform the directors about Aqua's request and to allow directors to opine on this issue about whether ACWD should contribute to the Aqua effort. I did not put this on the agenda as a potential action item because actually I have the authority to make this expenditure, but I did want to get a sense and receive board input which would help influence my decision, and my decision is likely going to be in the range of $10,000 to $25,000. Frankly, $25,000 seems a little steep to me for this effort, but obviously I'm interested in input from the board. And then that would kind of give me a little bit of flexibility depending on what other agencies are deciding to do and consulting with Mr. Davis to try to figure out, A, should ACWD contribute to this effort at all? So that would be good input for me this evening. And B, if so, do you have any thoughts about the level of contribution that ACWD might make? So I know that was a lot of information. Thank you for your time on that, but this kind of thing doesn't come up every day, and I wanted to make sure that I engaged with the board on this. So with that, I'm receptive to all input that you may have. And I do have the bill. It's 36 pages. It's complicated. There's provisions in here not only for the water tax, but in full disclosure, there's also a fertilizer tax and a dairy tax, but the levels of contribution are very modest. And Ron estimates that to fund this effort, less than 20% of the revenue that's going to be collected is going to be collected from ag, and 80% or more will be on the shoulders of the urban water customers. So given that a lot of these issues are nitrates in these communities, which are ag-induced issues, in other aspects of how the water community does business, the concept of beneficiary pays is how we do business. And in this case, it just seems like the reason why ag is supporting this bill and why it might pass is because because normally ag doesn't like any kind of tax, but because it's modest, I think they're thinking that it's a good deal. So with that, I'm available to respond to questions.
Director Weed?
First of all, support the recommended or suggested contribution. But it's frustrating. And if you don't mind a few minutes opining on this. The database is misleading. And among that 1 million persons was a report of people getting inappropriate water, was based on within the Bay Area in 2015, where San Francisco slipped up and puts a bad slug of water, and not all the water districts were able to respond in time to correct it, so we ended up with some of those areas within some very wealthy communities in the Bay Area, and then even East Palo Alto was one where it didn't have a way to isolate itself. Sunnyvale, which was the staff asleep at the wheel, and some other places that got hit. But more importantly, there has, in the ag area, it's in particular, it's been an absolute failure on the part of the people running the water supply to address the needs of the disadvantaged. And that's a cultural problem in the state, and one that could be addressed by the water community. The cost is not that high. In the urban areas, I would suggest it's the unfortunate guidelines of the conservation community in giving us a very dysfunctional rate structure. An appropriate rate structure, which would be 15% commodities, which we would bill to customers, and even have a zero tier where most people would not have any water bill, and putting water supply on the fixed charge on the property tax would make sense and easily address the issue without the state having to come in or without us having to run a help on tap program. We have a strategic plan that calls for transparency and equity. 1.3 on that list would address that issue. The water tax, once started, has no bounds. It just goes on and on. If it were to be to fund the DWR and take it off budget, maybe so. Then they would be able to pay reasonable rates to their staff. We'd have a much better quality of information coming out of the and staffing of the state, which have underfunded positions, and therefore, and it's reflected in the quality of the staff and some of the decisions coming out of Sacramento. So we have a dysfunctional system, and Aqua has failed to address it historically, and I would suggest Aqua's efforts and suggestions currently are woefully misguided and inept. Thank you. They have a special committee on it, which I was, well, we'll go on later.
Okay, so we're not going to talk about the rate structure at all, but I would just say, Director, we had discussion at the rate hearing, and some of your proposal may or may not be doable. So we'll put that aside.
They're doable.
But as far as, or legal, actually, but as far as this particular tax, I am against the water tax. I philosophically have two issues with it. That our low-income customers who could barely afford to live in the district has to subsidize someone else that's outside the district with what very limited resources they have. Second problem I have with it is being a tax collection agency for the state. When we increase our water rate, we have a justification to our customers. we are responsible, and we explain why we need every penny. If the state really wants this money, they should have the guts to tell the taxpayers in the state why they need the money, how the money will be spent, and how it will be controlled, and who will benefit. There are just too little details to even put this on a trailer bill. Come on. Right, so philosophically, I definitely am opposed to it. I would support the effort to help Aqua, but $25K is a lot of money. Right, and part of me would say, yeah, we could help out, but at a much lower level, because, you know, what is the benefit to the district besides my philosophical objection? That's my problem of what's to justify spending $10K or $25K besides the fact that Judy really hates it. Right, so keep it to $1. I am willing to support it, but just not at $25K. At $10K, I'm having a little bit heartburned already. Okay.
I actually have a few questions. Do we function, or on our bill, do we have any taxes that currently go to the state? Do we function as a tax collection agency for the state currently?
No, all we collect on our bill are just our normal service charges to fund the district.
Okay. And approximately how much would this add to a ratepayer's bill?
So the way they have structured this is variable depending on the size of the water meter. And I'm just looking to double check, but I believe the majority of our customers, 1-inch meter or less, would see, I believe it would be about $2 a bill, $1 a month. I'm double checking, but I think it's 95 cents, which is probably a strategically selected number, less than $1.
Okay. And then another question kind of on our relationship with Aqua. Don't we already pay some sort of membership fee to Aqua that would typically cover legislative advocacy work on our behalf?
Yeah, so the issue with Aqua is, remember that Aqua is comprised of both urban and agricultural agencies. So I am certain that the ag membership in Aqua is not interested in funding any opposition to this bill. But you are correct. Aqua does have lobbyists on staff, and they have community affairs folks on staff. But my suspicion is they've decided to outsource this and have it as a separate place on the books, so that they can assure their ag membership, who isn't very happy in Aqua in some respects right now, that they're not paying for this. And I bet the urban agencies were demanding that Aqua do something. And most of Aqua's membership is urban agencies. So I think they were probably put in, Tim Quinn, the executive director of Aqua, was put in a challenging situation, and this is how they decided to handle it.
Okay. In terms of direction, I think I'm on board with us contributing at some level to Aqua's efforts. Definitely not at the $25K mark, though. I think I'd be more comfortable somewhere between like the $10,000 and $15,000 range.
And I have confirmed, because the bill has been amended several times, that's why I wanted to check, but it is 95 cents per month for 1-inch meter or less. Great, thank you for the input.
Well, my personal view is as high as Aqua wants. I find it's a hidden tax, incredibly sneaky interesting way to hide a tax. I have real heartburn with this. We have been a responsible agency for 100 years. We have taken care of, we just had our groundwater basin issue tonight. We took care of it ourselves. Nobody came in here and helped us. And by the way, that was back when this district was an ag district. We were still basically agricultural then. We didn't become this rich area like the last 10 years. The state does this. I'm not surprised at all that East Bay Mud and San Francisco are not going to do anything. Because they operate like that. This is how our government in California operates, and it disgusts me. It brings up New Orleans to me. New Orleans is a city that's below sea level, and they blame the federal government because their levees failed in a hurricane. The hurricane didn't hit New Orleans. It hit Mississippi. And yet they successfully blamed the government and then re-elected all their local officials that were involved in the failure. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. We're going to throw money out there, and they're just going to re-elect all their people that are out there, and they're going to say, look what we did. No, we did it. This is going to pass. I have almost no doubt this is going to get through, because that's our state legislature. This one gets me pissed off, obviously. I have no surprise. I strongly feel this is going to make it. I strongly oppose it. I'm not sure how our legislators are going to, our legislative support is going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if they vote for it. It's do good, feel good legislation. Oh, this is the right thing to do. The right thing is to charge our people here. I want to know what they're going to do with the money. And if this does go through, I want an item on our bills that specifically say this is what this is. Because we just sat through a meeting and I had to read 6,000 protests for our last rate increase. So people out there actually care in our district about our rates going up. And here's the state saying, oh, we're going to use you guys because you got money. Well, some of us have money. Some of us have more money than others. And some of our people out there don't have money. We had to develop our own Help on Tap program because nobody would help us. Nobody in the state came forward and helped us. We did it ourselves. Just like we fixed our own groundwater basin. Just like we're fixing our plant, water treatment plant number 2. And I don't see that out there. And I think we're throwing money at bad. So anyway, obviously I oppose it. I'm in favor of what Aqua needs. And I also think we better get ready to find out what we're going to have to do when it passes.
Well, I think that we need to step back and look at what has been going on with this issue and the appeal that Aqua has made to us. This is an emergency. We should have a sense of urgency here. I'm with Director Gunther. We need to put in $25,000 in my opinion, because things are on the express wagon right now. And Aqua needs our support before the end of the budget season here. And we are one of a dozen or so large urban water agencies, right, coastally. 15. let's say 2 dozen.
Okay, fine.
And those 2 dozen agencies are the ones that really have to step up to the table right now. And I don't agree with board members at San Francisco or East Bay Mud or any board members that are displaying to the public pussyfooting around on a matter like this. If we don't put in the $25,000 in response to this, I would consider it a tepid response, inadequate. And we need to marshal all resources. We're fighting a battle here. And let me make 2 other points. I agree with all the tax issues that were brought up. But aside from that, what I really dislike is that this is a regional transfer of money from primarily coastal urban water agencies to other regions of the state, directly or indirectly, to help other districts or agencies manage their own SGMA groundwater efforts. And so it's the urban coastal agencies subsidizing what's going on in other regions of the state. The second issue I have, and I brought this up before, Director Weed and I have been regular attendees at the WELL conferences, Water Education for Latino Leaders. We'll be at that conference later this month up in Sacramento again. And, you know, we have board members that we're good friends with at Santa Clara who have brought up the very fact that there are as many disadvantaged people just in the city of San Jose as there are in all Eastern California communities along the Sierras. And so we're taxing disadvantaged people in large populations along the coast to subsidize other people inland. And I just don't see any equity in that. So I'm opposed to this for quite a number of reasons, but I would implore upon the board, this is a state of emergency. We need to step up to the table and be serious players in responding to what is going on. I don't want to see this agency, like I said, pussyfooting around or providing a tepid response when we need to provide some leadership.
Okay. I appreciate all the feedback. If there's any other directors that would like to provide any additional feedback, I'd appreciate that, but otherwise I will consider everything in total and make a decision. I'll make it quickly and we'll move on.
You can tell we feel very impassioned about this.
Well, I've received very clear direction that we want to assist in Aqua's effort. What I need to think about and get some more information about is, you know, what degree, because there's differences of opinion among the directors.
Well, you know, I would also remind the board members, we're going to be at our spring Aqua meeting, and we need to stand up to our colleagues in the industry face to face and state our case and firmly. So we're not operating in hiding in this industry. Everyone in the room in our committee meetings and other sessions will know the stand that ACWD took, and that's why I emphatically, you know, will encourage other board members to talk to the general manager, but I feel like we should go in with the max here.
Chairman, here. Go ahead.
If the board, it sounds like the board does feel fairly strongly about moving forward with funding this effort, and if I think we have 2 colleagues on here who are very passionate about this, and and if it'll help make your decision easier, I am willing to move forward with the $25,000 that Aqua has requested. If that'll help make the case better on behalf of Aqua.
Thank you, Director Akbari.
I won't oppose 25,000, but I think 10,000 is the initial. As an ante, is appropriate, allows us to still be in the communication. I wrote an email, leaving Washington, D.C., it suddenly wrote an email on covering some of these issues to Tim Quinn and copied Robert Shaver, our general manager. There are two movements that have impacted water operations. First was the conservation environmentalist group, which expanded into conservation. And second was the environmental justice. Environmental justice trumps the environmental movement. We've seen that it has greater support in the legislature, and no doubt. An example of where I think it could be played, if we could somehow tie it to it. We talk about renewable energy, but you can't apply electricity generated from large dams is not considered renewable in this state because environmentalists didn't like it. About 5 years ago, there was a conference in D.C., we'll tie that into this report, and so I won't have to speak later. There was a proposal that on the FERC process that money be identified that could be willed to any meter in the country from the large federal dams, WAPA power, which is less than 10% of the cost of normal power. Most of these areas will require membrane technology. 70% of the cost of that operating those facilities is electricity. If you can subsidize that with water from large dam projects, you now have provided a way to subsidize the programs, and you have a mechanism to do it and put this environmental justice ahead of the other sort of people that are using power, and that may be a way to make this work. And at the same time, consider it renewable energy. God help us. They don't like dams, so they don't want to give a benefit to a dam. We deal in a surreal world of where policymaking is not based on rational decisions. And finally, I've used the term property taxes earlier for charging the service charge. It really should be to property owners, whether it's charged on the property tax or not, and that we can do. Thank you.
Any other comments?
If I could add just one thing, you heard me earlier in this meeting say that you cannot use district resources to advocate for a ballot measure. I just wanted to just clarify that this is a different situation. This is for legislation. When I first heard this proposal, like, ooh, there's some legal issues here. So looked into this, and there's an express statute in the government code that allows the use of district resources to engage through a representative or through ourselves to oppose legislation. So I just wanted the board to know that we looked into this, and this financial contribution to Aqua for this purpose is allowed under the law, whereas using district resources to campaign or advocate for or against a ballot measure that's actually on the ballot is not okay. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. This is probably a little bit risky for me to propose, but if you do a weighted average of all the numbers that were expressed to me by the director, that's $19,000. So I'll just leave that there. Okay.
Why don't we round it up?
We have a second item. I'm sorry about the Debbie Downer 6.4.1. So now we're going to a puppy upper item 6.4.2, which will be presented by Mr. Wunderlich.
All right, I wanted to read briefly from a news release from the Government Finance Officers Association. It says the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting has been awarded to the Alameda County Water District by the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada for its comprehensive annual financial report, also referred to as the CAFR. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment. Now, they don't just hand these out, you have to earn it. So our CAFR was judged by an impartial panel to meet the high standards of the program, which includes demonstrating a constructive spirit of full disclosure to clearly communicate our financial story and motivate potential users and user groups to read the CAFR. This is the 19th year in a row we have received this award from GFOA, and just like to take a moment to recognize our accounting staff, Lynn Lamb, our accounting manager, and Mariana Grajeda, our accounting supervisor, as well as the whole accounting team who I know work very hard on this every year. And it's really not about the award, it's about having financial statements and a financial report that are presented in a way to provide this type of information to the community. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions or take any feedback on this item.
Mr. Wunderlich, would you know how many other agencies in the state of California are at this level of successive awards like this?
19 in a row, I really couldn't tell you. Based on my experience in reviewing the financial reports presented by other water districts, many agencies do prepare reports that meet the standards to achieve this award. It is by far the most subscribed to award of the GFOA programs.
Well, congratulations again to finance team and staff.
And barring any additional questions on this item, that is all we had for this evening for general manager's reports.
Okay, we'll move on to director's reports. You may see 7.1 on your agenda. The actual date of the California Water Commission meeting was changed to February 21st, and I was not able to attend because I had jury duty that day, so there's no report. And Director Weed, would you like to report on going to Washington, D.C.?
As former director described it as 10 Cup Week, where you go back and look for money from the federal government. I had the opportunity to go, I'm on the Federal Affairs Committee, so I had an opportunity to just go a day before the actual meeting and to do lobbying on Capitol Hill. I was with a group looking at infrastructure and infrastructure issues. There appears to be a change in mindset along some critical areas. Waters of the United States will probably be revisited by the various agencies to not include percolation ponds or settling ponds next to that are part of a sewage treatment or water treatment facility. Wetlands have always been part of that, but now they were trying to, under the Obama administration, we're trying to expand that definition dramatically, requiring more permits for a lot of projects that would not have otherwise been needed. The second item was the inability to get the water conservation projects and program the same tax-exempt status as electrical conservation programs. Universal support. The problem was stated several times that it was the author of the bill, a Democratic congressman from the Humboldt area, was known for his effusive support of the wildest conservation ideas that turned the party off, and they couldn't get the votes. They changed the name of the sponsor. They thought it might go through. And even with that, there seems to be, since there is universal support and it makes so much sense, it may still be accomplished possibly by administrative action. So currently, if you replace a lawn, etc., and you you'll be taxed on that, on the benefits that the district gives the person. When the electrical energy, that would not be a taxable income. If the amount is over $600, we're required to issue a 1099 under some interpretations of the law. Ironically, corporations don't get 1099s. They're trusted to be able to report the money on their own. So it's one of the more modest dollar amounts, but it's one of the issues that's been frustrating to the water industry. Some great speakers, and I was truly impressed with Garamendi's skills as an orator, and he gave a very accomplished talk on issues. Then we had a variety of various congressmen and come through and speak on the various issues. That's it. Thank you.
Director Huang?
So I just want to take this opportunity to say Happy International Women's Day, and thank you for the ACWD tweet. It is great to see that the tweet actually showcase our women engineers, professionals in the district, and their contribution to having safe drinking water in the district. Do not get me wrong, I appreciate all our staff and their contribution. It's just today's special, so thank you all the ladies. Great job.
Director Akbari? Okay. Gunther?
Director Sethy kind of tuned us into the, what was it called, the Niles
Creek Crawl.
Creek Crawl. And I did go out to that, and I know Director Weed went, but I would like for the record to know that Director Weed and I and Director Sethy, we were not together. Director Sethy and I were together. Director Weed was not within our presence. We couldn't even see him. So he behaved very well. We behaved very well. I just wanted to comment, the staff, I think, did a terrific job out there. This group, they're kind of different. I like their concept. They actually had a coastal engineer on the group, which is kind of different from most of your processes like this. And perhaps maybe being an ocean engineer and a coastal engineer, we were able to communicate with those civil engineers in the way. But I actually kind of believe what they're trying to do is not necessarily a bad thing. It's going to be very difficult to implement with the coastal development that's going on, the concept of using sediment, and I guess you could say salt marshes to buffer sea level rise. Not exactly a new concept. And it's interesting to see a group trying to build a support from that, from the environmental community. And it was interesting. I really enjoyed it, and I think the staff did a terrific job. They were set up right in front of our fish screen for bunting, right? And it was funny because I think most of the people were clueless as to what they were looking at when they were standing right next to it. And we did point it out, and pointed out ones across the way, and the concept of the fish ladder. The rubber dam was down, which was also another interesting thing, because they were clueless as to where the rubber dam was. And here they are practically standing right next to it. So I think it was very good to educate the public that was out there. I had a really good time that day, and I found it very fascinating and interesting. I think the organization has potential. They're trying to bring youth into this, and anytime they seem to actually have a science base to what they're doing, which I found interesting. There's actually a group, I think it was out of New York or something, was the main driving consultant company. So it wasn't a cutesy, fancy, let's go stroll through Niles Canyon and look at the pretty birds and see where the fish are going to swim. These guys actually had some technical stuff and some technical people. And like I said, I really enjoyed it. There were no standard specs, but
May I mention something very briefly, because I should have raised it during the water affordability. There's a symposium by the State Water Resources Control Board that was posted on the computer just before I came to the meeting. Thursday, April 5th, it'll be a symposium with leading researchers, national experts on innovative, affordability practices, and attendees will include state, local officials, water suppliers, and community-based organizations. It'll also be webcast, and I encourage, I would hope to attend in Sacramento, and but in any case, I encourage people to look at it and possibly, and our staff to keep an eye on it. Thank you.
So I have just a few quick reports here. I did attend the South Bay Engineers meeting last Friday, and it was a very good presentation on archaeological and cultural effects as you go through the CEQA process. And it was very interesting because the two presenters were giving live examples of working with Caltrans, with PG&E, water and sewer districts that are laying pipes in the ground, anything going into the ground, where you may be hitting upon a past archaeological site or encounter archaeological findings, cultural findings, and it's not really a tedious process, but as I was talking to one of our engineers, it's one that we follow diligently as a district, and for me it was a really good learning exercise to see that aspect of CEQA, which I've really never been exposed to. Feeding off of Director Gunther on the Alameda Creek crawl, I first want to thank our assistant to the general manager, Ms. Heides. You did a terrific job prepping me with my presentation materials, and also the public really appreciated our handout. I mean,
Mr. Stevenson over here.
Yeah, they really appreciated the handout. And it was, I don't know, it was like 70, 80 people by my count that were there.
well, it sold out, I know that.
Yeah. Every parking space was taken, and it was a really interesting group. We also had some members of Alameda Creek Alliance tag along, members of the Niles community that came out that we know, and Tri-City Ecology also had members that came. In fact, Dr. Rich Godfrey, who's the chair, he met with Mr. Shaver this past week, and he's also the chair of the Sustainability Commission for the City of Fremont. So yeah, it was really good. I wish we had more chances to do something like that. And there's a real news story, because people really appreciated what we're doing with the fish ladders, and they're looking forward to all the progress that we're making along the creek. And it was a revelation to a lot of people to realize, and Director Gunther spoke to this personally, about the 20-year plus effort to get to this stage, and that you have to have committed staff over the years, board members, everything, and support of the community too, to get to that point. We still got about 5 years to go. Just remember, from the inception of the idea of the desal plant by Director Redeker in 1973, it took 30 years to get the plant up and running. So you really have to have a commitment. I had the distinct pleasure of being selected as a Rotary judge last week to judge the speech contest at the regional level for all the Rotaries in the Tri-City area. And we were led by Mayor Nagy of Newark, Mayor Lily May of Fremont, myself, a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and a school board member from Union City. And I have to tell you, it was very uplifting to go through that, because despite all the news and commotion that we hear every day on the news, I have faith in the younger generation that's coming forward. Lots of good ideas and very articulate in how some of these young people made their presentations. So I wish all of them good luck. And let's see, we had 2 items under consent, and I just want to bring them up briefly. We were honoring Jill Durig, who is the retiring general manager of Zone 7, and of course she was a longtime employee here at ACWD as well. So I think that we all want to wish her a good future.
Yep.
And then Lori Balzerzak, I wanted to call out personally because I've known her for a long time. She started here at the district at an entry-level position 31 years ago. And she, through a lot of education, moved up continually in her career, found a career path to go all the way to the top of the district as a Class 5 water treatment operator. And to see her level of dedication, her commitment to her own continuing education, and the fact that the district itself was supportive in creating this unique career path along the way. It takes a business or a district that's willing to create these opportunities for its employees. So, Jennifer, for the future employees, I think you have your poster lady, considering it's International Women's Day. She is the epitome of someone who, with a lot of drive, and she happens to be a close neighbor of mine too, so she may be disappearing from the district, but I will still see her in the neighborhood. So wish her the best of success too. And then lastly, as a reminder, I think we have a Tuesday monthly board meeting next month, right?
That's correct. April 10th, I believe, is the date. It's the April regular board meeting, which occurs on that Tuesday. It's the odd duck.
Once a year, we do not have a meeting on a Thursday, and that's to have the public hearing for the groundwater. Yeah, to meet the state law requirement. So with that, I will turn it over to our legal counsel because we have one final matter, which is a closed session.
Sure.
Yes, it is 8:28, and the board is going to convene into closed session pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. Agency designated negotiators are Robert Shaver, Jennifer Rogers, and Glenn Berkheimer, and the employee organizations are Operating Engineers Local 3 and ACWD Operators Association.
All right, so we're back in session here, and why don't I allow the general manager to cover?
Certainly. The board met in closed session and is reconvening at 9:01 p.m. And in closed session, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, the board met with its labor negotiators, Robert Shaver, Jennifer Rogers, and Glenn Berkheimer, regarding employee organizations, Operating Engineers Local 3 and ACWD Operators Association, and the board provided direction to its agency designated negotiators. And that concludes this closed session report.
I think we had one person that was not there.
Well, Glenn Berkheimer was not in the meeting, but he is one of the designated negotiators. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
With that, any other comments or? Nope. Adjourn the meeting? Okay.